Chapter 25. All is Bright. The villagers had all gathered round when the reindeer-drawn sleigh touched down in an open area between two rows of small homes. Chris exited the sleigh and helped Ava down. Rudy immediately approached them. "Make way," he called out to the gathering crowd. "The king and princess are among us." A couple of women brought a beautifully knit blanket and draped it around the shoulders of the princess. Chris smiled as he shook Rudy's hand. "Wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again," Chris admitted. "You are amongst friends now, Your Highness," Rudy assured him. "The shepherds have shared the news with all who will listen. The people you see here believe your story. We are ready to fight, if fighting must be done." Chris smiled at the reassuring welcome. "I brought someone you might recognize," he said. Rudy broke out in cheerful laughter as Calvin emerged from the sleigh. "Brother, you're alive!" Calvin jumped down and the two embraced. "Peace to you," Calvin said with a wide smile. Rudy laughed again. "And goodwill to all." Chris looked around at the crowd, overwhelmed by the support he felt, but unsure of what to say to them. The crowd suddenly parted to allow another group to enter the throng. They were a group large in number, but small in size. Chris grinned. "Hello, my friends," he called out to the elves. Grinkers made his way to the front of the pack in order to address Chris. "Your Highness," he said respectfully, "I trust Felix was able to help you escape." Felix, who was still standing in the sleigh, answered for Chris. "I was successful in saving Kris Kringle," he told Grinkers. "But the 8 are lost." A somber feeling fell upon the elves, and even the humans as they watched the conversation sympathetically. "They are no longer with us," Grinkers corrected Felix. "But they are not lost." He rubbed the snout of a reindeer that had bowed his head before him. "Hello there, Blitzen," he greeted the deer lovingly. Grinkers turned to Chris again. "We elves removed ourselves from the humans because we feared above all else this very scenario. The humans would enslave and execute us in order to utilize our magic for their gain. I have seen great evil in the human race." He then smiled at his friend. "But I have also seen tremendous good. We came here because evil men had forced us here, our homes destroyed, and our elves kidnapped. But now we are here to help the best human we know. What are your orders, Kris Kringle?" Before Chris could offer an answer, the sound of galloping horses was heard by the crowd. Chris stood upon the sleigh to see who was approaching. 3 royal guards on horseback stopped just before entering the throng. "We have an urgent message from the king," the guard called out to the villagers in a harsh volume. "The king is already here," Rudy countered, and several in the crowd cheered their agreement. "Renier, the true leader of Silverbell, has a message for all the kingdom," the guard repeated with irritation. He pulled out a piece of parchment and read it aloud. "Be it known to all that the traitor Kris Kringle, also disguised under the name of St. Nicholas, has escaped from the castle, disobeying the laws of justice and order. He claims to be the king and is seeking those to join him in his rebellion against Renier, the true king of Silverbell. Any who are found housing, protecting, defending, or otherwise supporting this traitor will face the same penalty of death that will be bestowed upon him. King Renier will arrive at dawn with his full army to once again establish order in the kingdom. Those who wish to live and be protected should manifest it by burning a fire in their homes. The smoke of the chimney will be a sign that you support Renier, the rightful king, and your lives will be spared accordingly." The guard paused to glare at the crowd. "But if you do not establish this signal by the morning," he continued reading, "you will be seen for what you are, an enemy to the crown and kingdom." The guard rolled up the parchment and looked over at Chris. "You're a dead man, Kringle," he warned. "But there's no need to bring these people down with you. Turn yourself in before morning or flee from this place forever, but do not fight a battle you are sure to lose." The guards turned their horses and galloped away back toward the castle. All eyes were suddenly on Chris, who stood there in the sleigh to address them. "I know you didn't ask for this," Chris began, looking out at the crowd and noticing many worried faces. "I can promise you that I didn't ask to be a king. But it happened, and I know it happened, and I cannot deny or run from it. I, like you, loved King Wenceslaus. He gave me this robe because he trusted me to save the kingdom he loved, the kingdom we love. We cannot stand aside when evil men like Renir seek to imprison the innocent and use the threat of death as a way of governance. There is more going on here than you know. Renir has become a beast in a literal sense. He is in search of a way to ensure his life and power continue on forever. I am not asking you to believe in me or to fight for me. If you fight tomorrow, you must fight for you, for your children, for your right to be free from bondage. He paused for a moment, and when he did, Ava climbed aboard the sleigh to stand next to him. You have the right to fight for your freedom, Chris continued, holding the hand of Ava. But you also have the right to be free from the fighting. If any of you choose to light your fireplace and thereby signal to Renir that you stand with him, none of us will condemn or stop you. You and your house must choose for yourself who you will follow. A long silence fell upon the crowd, each person considering in their minds what they had heard and what action they would take. Whispering soon spread throughout the multitude of villagers, and several people began nodding their heads. Very well, it's decided then, one of the men finally said aloud. Grab an axe and meet me at the trees. Chris sighed as he saw nearly a third of the crowd head for the forest to chop down trees for firewood. You won't have everyone's support, Ava told him softly, placing her hand on his cheek. But you have mine. And mine, Grinkers interrupted. Again I ask you, what are your orders, Kris Kringle? Grinkers and the elves looked at Chris with expectation. We have a war in the morning, Chris reminded them. And yet none of us here are warriors. We are not equipped for battle. You need weapons and armor made, Grinkers concluded. Chris nodded. We need a lot made in a little amount of time. You're singing our song, boss, Felix chimed in with a smile, and the elves immediately made their way to the blacksmith shops to begin the tremendous overnight task of outfitting the villagers with armor, shields, and swords. Rudy began taking charge of the villagers who had stayed behind, organizing battle plans and techniques with those who had the most experience in combat. It was just an hour before midnight, and yet the entire village was more alive and busy than Chris had ever seen it during the day, each person fulfilling a specific duty to prepare for the battle. Chris helped out in every way he could, ensuring that every needful thing was ready for tomorrow. When the night grew later and darker, and all that could be accomplished was done, Chris brought Ava to a hillside overlooking the village where they could be alone. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, he told her, but you must promise me that if things get very bad, if it looks like we will not win, you must take the sleigh and get far away from here. Ava rested her head on his shoulder as the two looked down on the village that was now mostly dark and quiet. Wherever you are is where I will be, she promised. Chris sighed sadly. Every time he thought of the two of them spending their lives together, he was reminded of the answer Percy's parchment gave him about their future. But he tried not to think of that now. He held her close to him and offered a silent prayer that she would be spared in the battle that would soon be upon them. Time passed as the two sat there in thoughtful silence, holding each other close in the cold night air. It was perfectly quiet. Not even the sound of a cricket's chirp could be heard. Tomorrow there will be conflict and struggle, Chris whispered to himself, but loud enough for Ava to hear. But tonight, all is calm. He closed his eyes and rested his head upon Ava's. All is bright, she said with surprise in her voice, lifting up his head. Chris opened his eyes to see the village below them suddenly aglow. Before every house and cottage in the village, there suddenly appeared a cone-shaped beacon of light. What is it? Chris asked in wonder. Ava stood up to get a better view. They're trees, she stated. Evergreen trees. They've put candles and decorations on the branches. As a breeze formed below, the soft chiming of the small bells placed upon the trees could be heard throughout the village. Chris stood up as well, his mouth open in astonishment. I don't understand, he admitted. Ava smiled as she grabbed his arm. Don't you see, Chris? These are the trees those villagers had gone to chop down. Renir wants them to burn firewood as a symbol of their loyalty to him. She pointed to the scene before them. They are doing the opposite, decorating and showcasing the would-be firewood to show their allegiance to you. These ornamented trees are a symbol of the side they have chosen. She kissed Chris and held his face close to hers. They are a symbol of their belief in the true king.